On previous real-side experiences that I've shared throughout the years, one of the themes that has been relatively frequent is the acquisition of what I would broadly categorize as artifacts. Anything is possible in a simulated computer game-like creational realm based on the principles of a cause and effect or idea file input to simulated output effect. It simply is a case of installation of the idea, and we experience the simulation as effected from it. The consciousness then is the engine room of our simulation, and through the body vehicles, so we create and formulate ideas, or we agree to the ideas as created by others, the same result will apply. As the body vehicles, also effected from consciousness, have the mechanics to decode these ideas into a simulation, just like any computer can convert the files of a computer game into graphics on the screen. And so, any situation, any experience is possible, and in regards to what we might term objects or items of a power or potency, anything that has such properties, again, is something that has been decided to be so. The idea, consciousness applied, and such items of a power come into being as something completely new, or however the consciousness currently is in regards to what is decided as to what is possible and what isn't, is worked with for the formulation of our powerful item or artifact. In reality, our creational ability has no limits, only limitations that are applied through a consciousness, where already established agreements dictate limitation that a certain series of actions need be taken for a particular desirable outcome. Just like building a car are the various stages as established agreements, limitations in regards to illusory time required and the technologies utilized, but in actuality were such consciousness agreements bypassed, one could have just as easily have decided that the means involved in making a car require the blowing of one's nose, and said car will manifest. For on the real side, as we are removed from the consciousness and operate as the real awareness, so we have experiences where from the perception of the average human, we would be bending and breaking the laws of physics with our activities. Laws which are just limitations according to consciousness idea programs agreed with. And so, if it is decided as to the creation of an object that is powerful in some shape or form, this is simply a created idea, original or working within the parameters of established consciousness agreement. For as individuals do become, as an example, magic practitioners, they are doing so by bypassing the established consciousness, and are the kind of beings most likely to bring forth such items into a creation, if this is their choice to do so. Throughout the many eons of this simulator's existence, literally speaking, as in reality there is no time, just a consciousness of ideas that can be isolated through body vehicle mechanics that present the illusion of distance, time, of a differentiation and a sequence of events, so have many such artifacts been created for whatever purpose they were intended to serve, and just as many have either been abandoned, forgotten, or purposely hidden. For as you can imagine, if a consciousness constantly is compounded with ideas throughout eons and lifetimes, so this adds to the limitations as experienced and defected from it. In the earlier eras of this simulator, consciousness overall would be far less rigid and limited, and so far more likely would there be a greater expression of creativity, individuality, and the construction of such artifacts of power. And as civilizations come and go, such items are perhaps forgotten or not realized as to their purpose. Some also deliberately concealed, as the creators of them perhaps fear the consequences of such items falling into ill-intended hands. It must be remembered that artifacts and creational phenomena in all their forms are effected simulation from ideas, as everything is in creation, and ultimately we strive to be in positions of real awareness, detached indifference to all ideas, that we can stand as the real light beings we actually are, which is only possible with a complete divorcing of the attachment to anything creational idea-wise. We see the ideas for what they are, simulated unreality, that serve as comparisons to recognize the is by. However, we still will be creating and doing something as we go about our awareness process, ideally something that serves as a beneficial awareness-wise for all, and maintaining our real intent that awareness comes before the personal self, ensuring we are not absorbed into whatever we choose to create. Survival in creation is necessary that we can continue our processes of awareness. It's somewhat difficult to study in the classroom if it is being bombed as an example, that either we may need an alternative classroom or develop the ability to repel or mitigate the effects of such weaponry. And so, if such artifacts exist, and if through their power they potentially can be used beneficially to improve circumstances in creation, it makes sense to consider the acquisition of them, or at least to ensure the dark forces don't get a hold of them and use them for controlling purposes. I'm reminded of the movie series Indiana Jones, where the Nazis are constantly seeking such artifacts to further their war-mongering effectiveness, and Indiana Jones ensures, to the best of his abilities, that they are denied. That although, as I said, many of these artifacts may be very ancient, hidden and forgotten in the mists of time and memory, the real awareness as a part of the everything isness a true reality that animates through all consciousness and all ideas contained therein, will have full access to the details regarding anything ever created in the simulators, the purposes for the items, their application and location. And so have I been on a number of experiences where a group and myself are on assignment to retrieve such artifacts. Although not all details regarding the artifacts is necessarily provided to the personal self, usually as a means that the dark forces can glean nothing information-wise that may benefit them in regards to such items. For generally, what the personal self is shown and learns becomes a knowledge that the ever-watching and monitoring dark forces then possess. But they cannot access the real awareness overview of creation by virtue of they simply not choosing to assume their real awareness positions, and as such, that which the real awareness everything reality can reveal to the personal self is denied to them, and their only recourse is what they can glean as such information is transferred to our personal selves. Hence why certain information is then omitted from our personal experiences. And so, on this real side experience, I would be in the company of one other individual, what appeared to be a female human. She was also on her awareness process and had taken on and agreed with this assignment. She appeared to be a cop, dressed in the kind of police attire that suggested she was American. Our location wasn't revealed, but we had tracked a particularly powerful and potentially beneficial or dangerous item, depending on how it was used, to a deep and forbidding forest, wherever in creation this happened to be. We came across what appeared to be a bunker of a kind, partially concealed in the undergrowth, suggesting it had seen little use for the longest time. And indeed, this very bunker was as though a storage facility for this very artifact, as impressions would reveal. Both artifact and bunker very ancient, the artifact having been placed within the bunker and hidden in this remote forest with the intention that it never be found. The bunker was of a very sophisticated design, suggesting a construction by the hands of a species equally as technologically orientated, and a species that was in operation in the very ancient so-called history of the simulator. We would study the bunker's exterior. It was designed that access was possible, but only with the knowledge of how this was so. My cop associate had a more direct approach to accessing the bunker. She appeared to have in her possession a kind of a flamethrower, and attempted to engulf the exterior of the bunker to the extent that its integrity be compromised and access be possible. All she managed to do was set fire to various trees in our immediate vicinity, the bunker completely unaffected. I allowed her to come to the determination that this wasn't the best means of entry, and as she desisted in her fruitless efforts, I then stepped forward, pulling away a little foliage that a technological panel was visible. Leaning to the real awareness overview that everything creational and idea-wise is available, regardless of it being a technology from an ancient species, so my simulated self was afforded the skills to work the technology, a complex series of actions that produced a kind of holographic overlay that had to be manipulated in a certain manner. I would do so successfully, and an entrance would become apparent, as though it was designed in such a precise manner that until the safety protocols were bypassed, the entrance was indiscernible from the rest of the bunker's surface. The entry point became more so until there was a clear access now to the bunker, a very vast construction that descended deeply underground. Impressions were that it had been used for the period of time it was in a commission for the containing of all manner of items and keepsakes. The layout was segregated into sections, each with alien coding, a little like the numbers you might find on secure lockers. But it was as though whatever fate had befallen the species that once managed this bunker were either extinct or long gone, and their final action was to secure this single artifact deep within the bowels of the bunker, secure the entrance, and here the bunker and its prize had sat for who knew how long, forgotten until now. Before we could enter inside, our position was set upon by dark force agents. For as I said earlier, they can't access that which we can via the real awareness, but the moment it enters the personal self-experiential arena, they will determine what we are doing, where we are in creation, and if there is a value derived from interfering, they will do so. In this case, like the Nazi artifact hunters in the Indiana Jones movies, they wanted this powerful, long-forgotten artifact for themselves. As the outcome of altercation is agreement-dependent, our would-be intended assailants can only be successful in their attacking or eliminating efforts if we have agreements in regards to them that they can. We become progressively more indomitable as we proceed with our awareness processes, as we are releasing all agreements, including such that extend to the dark forces and bestow them with the ability to harm us in any way. Consequently, these agents were unable to eradicate us, but their primary objective was to get their ill-intended hands on the artifact, and so it fell upon my associate to keep them at bay with her flamethrower, which at least now was proving a more productive tool while I entered the bunker. My personal self would not see the simulation of the item's location, its appearance, etc., just the impressions that this had taken place, for reasons I have mentioned, that such information is denied the dark forces. For this reason also, I wouldn't emerge with the item that the agents clap eyes upon it. Instead, I actually repositioned it deeper in the bunker and in a different section of it, making it far harder to locate should anyone manage to enter the bunker and attempt to find it. I could have just perhaps relocated from the bunker with the item, but for whatever reason chose to leave it there for the time being. And as I re-emerged from the bunker, my cop associate, maintaining the rather inadequate dark agents at a distance with her flamethrower, so I sealed the bunker behind me, and these blundering agents certainly would be unable to determine how to work the alien tech to afford themselves entry. In a way, perhaps, the item was left there as a honeypot, for although perhaps the dark forces would be unable to access the bunker and retrieve the item, it would determine all those who were intent on doing so and would attempt such, and their reasons for its acquisition would be apparent to any real guide, or indeed impressions afforded via real awareness. I had the impressions we would return for it, and that even though its location was now revealed, it was inaccessible until we would return and claim it. We may even reinsert ourselves into a time frame prior to this experience and secure it. Anything's possible through real awareness. We can redo experiences as we see fit. But for now, we faded from the scene, leaving the dark force agents behind. I would find myself now travelling in a car. Present would be a few other individuals, along with my cop associate. All were those on their respective awareness processes, and as impressions also revealed, one was a real guide, though in the form of the character Boise, played by the actor John Chalice from the series Only Fools and Horses. The cop and I would be as though providing a report of our activities in regards to the artifact for the other aware beings present and the guide. The cop would also reveal her flamethrower to me, and it seemed far more sophisticated than I initially realized. It actually was as an extension of her very arm, and as she revealed, she was indeed in the role of an American cop on Earth, but she also was a kind of stepping up cyborg, of a type that could reform her exterior into any shape she desired, including the conversion of one of her limbs into a flamethrower. Seemingly looking very human externally, and as such she rather blended in with human society, evidently made possible by her not turning her arms into weapons in full view of other humans. As I conveyed to the group the exact location of the artifact, its whereabouts in the bunker as marked by the alien code, the code would be deciphered by the cop robot and be converted as human numerals. The numbers revealed would be 0, 1, 4. The numbers would superimpose themselves on her skin, then sink into it, as though she had a mechanism and body form design that translating languages also resulted in the translation being momentarily externally apparent on her skin, at least in that particular moment, that perhaps as she could alter her shape at will, potentially all considerations or thoughts could manifest in this manner, her body form actually altering according to even numbers that she processes. I imagine she must have the ability to suppress her shape altering as she goes about her physical level, earth-based, and posing as a human activities. My view would switch to an aside from a creation position, that I was now observing the very dark force agents who had attempted to claim the artifact from the earlier scene without their ability to realize I was doing so, as I wasn't presenting as a simulated form they could perceive or engage with. As it transpired, these agents were Earth-based. They had been deployed on the real side for the attempted artifact acquisition, and also they were in fact werewolves. Werewolves are a very real body form as effected from consciousness. Most tend to be minions and in association with the dark forces. Most tend to operate in creational positions that are as equally distorted as their monstrous body types, such as the lower astral, but they do have a presence on the earth and are deployed as assassins or utilized as guards. They indeed do have the ability to convert others to their kind through a bite and a scratch. But I must point out that just as it is with the reptilians, many such body forms, including werewolves, are stepping up also and choosing to become more aware. For I have shared real side experiences where werewolves have decided to embrace their awareness processes and assist with our assignments in various capacities. The werewolves in this experience, however, were ill-intended and very much dark force affiliated, deployed earlier, as I said, though doing so in their human forms. Some werewolves have the ability to switch between forms, wolf and human. Others are resigned to their wolf forms only. Also, there are two varieties of werewolf, broadly speaking: the quadruped, looking very much like regular wolves, though generally much larger, and the two-legged bipedal versions. Some werewolves can even alternate from a human to a quadruped and to a bipedal wolf additionally. These agents then had the ability to operate in human form and alter their forms at will to the quadruped wolf variety. My impressions revealed that they were in fact building their numbers, increasing their werewolf population, though at this time covertly on the earth, by infecting other humans. If they were under direction by higher standing dark force characters to do this, or that they chose to by their own volition, wasn't made apparent. They had a tendency to select certain humans that initially expressed an interest in becoming a werewolf. Presumably, they would have approved their claims, very likely shifting before the potential human recruit's eyes. For naturally, if they converted those unwilling, they would have much by way of rebellion, insurrection, and so forth to have to deal with. And as I watched a number of the pack, for want of a better term, they had a human in their midst, in a house. He evidently had been initially willing, but was rather regretting his choice at that moment. For although the conversion process may vary according to the type of werewolf, these particular four-legged werewolves, on biting their target, so the recipient's body is racked with extreme pain for a number of weeks, and when such abates, they then have the ability to also shapeshift into a werewolf. And so this man was writhing in agony, still in the throes of the transformative process. Interestingly, there was one female among them, a black-skinned woman in her early 20s, who, although was a part of the werewolf pack and had been then in affiliation with the dark forces, as all these particular werewolves were, she was now deciding to step up, become more aware, and walk away from the dark forces she had been operating in relationship with up until that point. The other werewolves were aware of her disenchantment with her current position and would threaten her life, that if she were to turn her back on the dark forces, she would be eliminated. She was rather fearful of the repercussions for abandoning the dark forces, but nevertheless was adamant, and one night she would slip away, never to look back. She would begin her process of awareness. She cultivated a very strong real intent and focus very quickly. For indeed, would the scene switch? A group of aware beings and myself would be located in a natural environment setting, and this very stepping up werewolf would approach us there, though in her wolf form. As a wolf, she was black-furred. That she was black-skinned as a human may have been coincidental, and interestingly, though her species couldn't communicate verbally in wolf form, they could establish telepathic communication with any being, and so could readily converse and interact in this fashion. It was through her extreme focus that she had established very quickly with her personal self the intent to be real, that she was immediately engaging with myself and various other individuals on their awareness processes, as she wanted to get involved with all the projects, the real side assignments. She additionally wanted to engage with us on the physical. She and her werewolf kind were Earth-based, as I said. She also was accompanied by a large number of children, and my impressions were that as children are detached from their consciousness until later indoctrinated into agreement with it, that as they operate as directly animated by real awareness prior to being absorbed into the social consciousness, that the forms of children are often representing of the year's true reality on the real side. This suggested the sincerity of the werewolf as she stood in the presence of this large body of children. The stepping up werewolf would then warn us that the werewolf pack had now been assigned the task of hunting new friends, not just on the real side, but the physical also, and indeed that they were coming for us at that very moment. She and all the children around her would fade from the scene, as she perhaps was rather vulnerable. For in the preliminary stages of the awareness process, as we begin to release agreements, it will be a while before we have released a sufficient quantity that facilitate us with better survivability in regards to the various dark force attackers we will undoubtedly encounter, for she would have much by way of agreements through her prior association with the dark forces that, until released, will render her in a position where the agreements dictate the potentiality of her destruction at the hands of the dark forces, and so, for the time being, a tactical withdrawal in the face of any incoming expressions of the dark forces was prudent. And as she predicted, so a large number of the earth-bound quadruped werewolves, also in their wolf forms, would enter the scene, led by a very fierce female. They would converge on my group and myself. Our fate depended not only on the choices the wolves made, but on agreements we also had in relation to them, if they could in fact eliminate us, if we had in fact permission ideas present in the consciousness unreleased that would allow this to be our experience. Apparently this would be the case for one of my group, as he was torn to shreds. A little like in the movies, where every human is just as vulnerable to, say, a monster-orientated threat, but what dictates then the survivability of the humans would be the script as shared between the monster and themselves, the agreement contract, in other words, that dictates the parameters of shared simulation between all those the contract agreement binds together. The rest of the group and myself, beyond the agreement ability of the werewolves to kill, were rounded up and the intention was to relocate us to another position, where according to these werewolves we would be contained, tortured, and so forth. The leading female wolf would convey this telepathically, as was their way when in their wolf forms. That the group and I were in reality not resigned to any fate as decided by the wolves, as we lacked agreements that ensured they in fact could do nothing to us unless we consciously decided it. So it was, however, that we would play along, presenting as though we were within the werewolves' power to imprison and abuse, as was their inclination. For as we engage with the dark forces, that which we are presenting, the ears, becomes more so known to them, as though, by virtue of them entering our experience, they become exposed to the light of the true reality. Perchance they may recognize the real purpose and true reality of themselves, and begin their own awareness processes. It is so then that the more we engage with the dark forces, in whatever manner they choose, as we play their games, so to speak, this then is the beneficial impact we can have. And now, as the group and myself would be removed to some form of containment according to the werewolves, the chances are that this presents as opportunity to engage with still further beings, other dark force characters, or perhaps those that are also imprisoned. And at any moment we can simply withdraw from the werewolf situation if it gets a little hairy, pun intended, for we are never resigned to any simulated experience unless we retain agreement with the ideas that effect our presence there.